This is the regular meeting of the Mobile City Council, Tuesday, March 24th. We have our invocation led by Jeffrey Kagoro, pastor of St. John United Methodist Church. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good morning. Before I say the word of prayer, let me just explain that you can hear my accent. I am from Africa, from Zimbabwe. I'm a new pastor at St. John. I just moved from Montgomery. I've been in Montgomery for 5 years, and I am now the pastor at St. John. So you can hear my accent, and you can hear the words, because God can hear all accents. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we come before you. We thank you, Lord. We praise you. We glorify you, the Almighty, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We thank you because you are a loving God. You love us so much. And we know that, Lord, we are here because you have called this group of men and women for reaching out to the people that you love so much. Thank you, because you are a God who sees when we are going through our difficulties. You are a God who comes down. You are a God who is here to deliver in this situation that we are going through for this city, for this nation, for the whole world. You are a God who created all people, and you are concerned about what is going through. And so we pray, Lord, that you are the healer, the redeemer. You are the God who takes care of all our concerns. I am praying, Father, that you bless your leaders who have been assigned to lead this city, this community. Give them the wisdom as they deliberate, as they discuss about the way forward on all the issues that needs to be attended to. Thank you, Lord, for being here with us, for your word always tells us that, remember, I'm with you always. So as we discuss, as we plan, as we focus on the way forward, you continue to be directing us through the Holy Spirit. We thank you and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. President Manzi.
Here.
Vice President Small.
Here.
Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Councilmember Daves.
Here.
Councilmember Rich.
Here.
Councilmember Gregory.
Here.
Statement of rules.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Even though we're going through a little trials, it's still a good morning. We still are present to run the City of Mobile business. And I would like to first provide a quick update on our meetings. We currently plan to continue to meet at our regular time for both the pre-council and council meetings here in the auditorium. With that said, following the executive order from the Governor Ivey, Council members are now able to meet remotely and still vote on items associated to the COVID-19 and essential city services. 2 of our colleagues will join us remotely this morning. Also, based on the guidelines handed down by the Alabama Department of Public Health, a limited number of people will be allowed entry, and in-person presentation, pensions, and other communication have been suspended for 30 days. Any interested parties are able to follow the live stream of our meetings available at www.cityofmobile.org/livestream/.org. The public can also email public comments, which will be acknowledged as received during the meeting, distributed to council members, and including in the meeting minutes. Citizens can also email such comments to the city clerk at cityofmobile.org up to 30 minutes prior to the meeting. We ask that everyone to please turn off all cell phone electronic devices upon entering the doors of this auditorium. Any person desiring to address the council must sign in indicating the resolution, ordinance, appeal, or public hearing agenda items before entering the meeting when addressing the council. The speaker must state his or her name and address. Each person is allowed 5 minutes to address the council. A bell will sound to indicate the end of 4 minutes. 1 minute remaining for summarizing. The second bell indicates the time has expired. When addressing the council, there is to be no personal address to individual council members. All statements are to be made to the chair, who will recognize any council member who wishes to respond. To maintain decorum, there will be no undue applause and or public outcry allowed. Madam City Clerk.
Mr. Chair, before we go forward, I just want to thank the pastor for coming and recognize him, because he is the pastor at St. John's, which is in my district. And an official welcome to Mobile here at the council. I don't think you've been here yet. Your predecessor, John Russell, came many times and offered the prayer for the citizens of Mobile before our meetings. And we just want to thank you, and also for your continued hosting of at least 2 of my community action groups who meet at the church. So thank you for all that you do at the church, and welcome to Mobile. We are happy to have you. I know many of your members, and they just think the world of you. So thank you.
Welcome. Madam Clerk.
Approval of minutes of March 17th.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Been properly moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed?
Aye.
Can't vote on those. Can't vote on that.
It passed.
5-0.
5-0.
Communications from the mayor.
Good morning. It's good to see those of you who are here and those who may be watching being live streamed. You know, we hear occasionally people make the comment that business as usual. You know, I think that that's really kind of a slip. There is nobody doing business as usual right now. What they may be trying to do is provide services that they have provided in the past, but it's certainly not in the usual format of what we're all so used to. We at the city are adapting to the changing environment. We will continue to adapt, and the purpose is to make sure that we provide a safe and healthy city and continue to provide the services at the highest level that's possible under the situation where we are. Obviously, it's on everybody's mind and in the media's mind about testing. There is more testing going on in Mobile this week than went on last week. There are more test kits that are available. There's still a shortage of test kits. All of them are being controlled by the hospitals and by the two health clinics, one being Franklin, and the other one I think is Mobile Urgent Care. They have control of those kits themselves, and you have to have an appointment with one of the referring physicians of those hospitals, all those urgent care units, in order to be tested. My prediction is that a week to 10 days from now, that there'll be more widespread testing as the tests become available. You've heard the comments, and we have talked about it almost every time I get behind a microphone, is that what is the city going to do And after really 10 days of intensive conversation and process of learning what is going on and how can we best fill a void, it appears that by us standing up a testing center, we're really going to be doing it for the benefits of the hospital. It will not be, let's say, city-run, so to speak. What we will do, we will stand the facility up, and it will be manned by the various hospitals that are sending their patients there. The idea is that the hospitals do not want their emergency rooms overcrowded, and they don't want the people who are sick but may not have the coronavirus to be clogging up their system. So, and if we can work in collaboration with them, stand up a couple of centers so that we can do that testing, it will relieve them. Right now, the number one priority, in my opinion, is to make sure that the health care providers are taken care of. The people that are working at the hospitals, whether it's doctors, nurse practitioners, nurses, orderlies, all of them, you know, we have got to make sure that they're taken care of. The second group is our first responders. And when I say first responders, I think that that's a nationally recognized term that means policemen and firemen and paramedics. But you know, there's another group that's just almost equally as important, and it's almost lockstep with them, and is that our sanitation workers. Because if you don't pick up the garbage, you're going to have another set of ills or sickness that you don't have today. So those are our focuses, is to make sure that those parts of the city are functioning. I believe that you will see the shortage of the personal protective equipment. That's probably going to be more readily solvable than the test kits. But anyway, all of that will ramp up. We're constantly on the phone, talking to the governor's office, talking to federal officials, talking to people in the healthcare industry, whether it's hospitals, trying to make sure that we're in sync and doing the things that we need to do. A lot of you are sending emails and sending suggestions. We're reading all of those, but right now, because of the volume of information that's coming in, we can't write a personal response to your email. You will get a response that's outlining our position and what we're doing, but the most important point is that your idea is being read and we're trying to act on it as we balance the equation of doing what's best to maintain your health and the economy of this city. So I believe that today we're better than we were this time last week. Matter of fact, I know we are. We know so much more than what we knew. We will know more this time next week. We will be doing more. Meantime, you'll see the mayor in this meeting like this with the social distancing, but you're going to see pictures of me in the future where I may be sitting behind a microphone or in front of a telephone, but there won't be any people in the room, because we are trying to do everything possible to not just talk about the social distancing, but also to set the example of how it can be done. So all of our executive directors and department heads, they now know that we're going to try to conduct business, if at all possible, without personal interaction. So that's my report, Mr. Vice President. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I do have a question for you, and not to really just put you on the spot with this particular question. I do understand that many of the tests have been sent to bigger cities like Birmingham and other bigger cities that have bigger population of people. But has it had been any consideration, as far as in just a month ago, that we were celebrating Mardi Gras here in the port city, and we had people from California, New York, DC, celebrating here in Mobile, and potentially could have left some virus here and went back home? Has that been in consideration with like FEMA or anybody?
No, I don't think that, I don't think that's been considered, because today, CJ, they're looking at the number of cases, and then they're looking at it on the percentage also. But because we haven't had many tests done, we don't have that many tests reported or that many cases reported. A comment, and this is not part of your question, if Mardi Gras were to be held starting next week, I think that we collectively would decide to postpone Mardi Gras. I mean, I just know that we would. But at the time when Mardi Gras came about, we weren't experiencing what we experience today. But the federal agencies are only going to be monitoring and sending equipment to those places that they call hot spots. New Orleans is a hot spot. Birmingham's a hot spot. Mobile, let's pray that it's not a hot spot, but we really don't know until we do more testing. Yeah.
Do you think it's possible, or if it's worth the while, that the city was send like a resolution to FEMA and just stating that we had many people from all across the United States come to Mobile to celebrate Mardi Gras, and we have some concerns and that we need probably more testing? Do you think that probably will help?
I don't think so, CJ, for this reason. The federal government who's trying to distribute some of these tests, Mobile and other cities like us, they're going to get tests because of relationships they've got with private labs and other things. The federal government is cumbersome at best, and they're going to go where the most people are, period, okay, in my opinion. And so all of us cities that are in the same situation, and most cities are just like us, they are trying to find test kits. And it's going to be, again, working collaboratively, using relationships, maybe willing to pay the price. But also, we're fortunate that we have 4 hospitals here and other health clinics that are kind of uniting in their voice, saying this is what we need, and we are creating that conversation, unifying them so that it's a bigger voice than just one of the hospitals saying they need something.
Thank you so much for your work.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Richardson.
Mr. Mayor, to your knowledge, are there any city employees who have been infected with the COVID virus?
No, at this point in time, and Councilor, we have the department heads, the supervisors, and everybody. We're monitoring every single employee every day to see who is absent, why they're absent, if they need to go to the doctor. And at this point in time, we've not had anybody to be reported that they've tested positive.
Outstanding.
And the other thing I would say in that regard, and Director Barber was making a comment about this earlier, we're going to have first responders that will be exposed. It's like people at the hospital are exposed, okay? And so what we're hoping is that we have a way of screening them with a test that can be done on the spot much quicker, and it will help us screen to see if somebody has been. It will not be I'm trying to think of the terminology. It will not be with the accuracy of the nasal test, but it will be an indication that maybe we should have them stand down or stay at home until we can get a nasal test.
Okay. Sounds good.
And that may be happening, that could happen as soon as next week, where we would be looking at testing on some kind of basis, and I'm not sure the frequency yet, our first responders, and probably some of our garbage collectors.
All right.
Madam Clerk.
Monthly finance reports.
Good morning, Mr. Vice President, council members. Good morning, Ms. Rich. Good morning, Mr. Mancy. I have a couple of things to mention today. First, we have the February financial reports in. February, as you know, is when businesses who have collected sales taxes during January pay them over to the city, then reports are compiled, and it's not till March that we get to report those. You've heard that before. The reason I repeat it today is it's very difficult to make any judgments about how the COVID-19 crisis will affect cities' revenues until much later in the year. In fact, March's results will not actually be available to us until May, so 2 months from now. For February, we had a pretty good month. We're ahead about $1 million in total revenues over budget and also over the same period last year. And all departments are within budget. Now, I do want to mention that we are starting to look at what the economic impact is going to be to Mobile from the coronavirus. And it's more of an art today than a science. There are very few jurisdictions and very few analysts who have put methodology out there that have been embraced by cities to date. Probably the best came to us from the comptroller of New York City at a time when New York was still open. That is, they were not shut down. And that methodology is one that we've adopted for the time being until we have actual data in our hands. They took the position, and we think it's reasonable, that for the foreseeable future, we will see about a 20% decrease in retail sales tax, an 80% drop in restaurant sales tax, and a 20% occupancy in our hotels. To give you a little reference, we do know anecdotally that our hotels are looking today at about a 6 to 12% occupancy rate. Hotels are not shut down. Their restaurants may be, and their meeting rooms may be, but the nightly occupancy is still there. We think that as travelers adapt more completely to auto travel as opposed to air, that our occupancy rates will trend up a little bit, but we don't have reason to doubt what the comptroller in New York said about that extending to the end of the year. We're looking right now at trying to measure a 2-month period. Let's call it April and May. What will the downturn indicate for us over 2 months? 2 months seems to be maybe not a majority, but a plurality of jurisdictions' choice as to what to measure at this point. Based on some of the criteria I mentioned, we're looking at a total loss of revenue per month of about $7.2 million, or for the 2-month period, about 14.4. To give you a reference point, our total revenues in a normal month, like the month we're in now, in April and May and June, is about $23 million in revenues. So if you do the math, that's we're indicating maybe a 30% drop in revenue for those 2 months. That could extend if this crisis extends, if the flattening of the curve doesn't happen early enough. But we don't think that we'll have a shorter period. So we're looking at 2 months as kind of the starting point. The good news is, thanks to our department's attention to budget, thanks to your passage of what have been, I think, conservative budgets in the past, and to good management of our employees and our projects and our finances, we have the surplus to weather that storm for that period of time without having to think about things like borrowing money or drastic furloughs or other cuts in services. So that's about all we know at this point. It's a starting point, and as time goes by, I think we can build on that. We hope to get some anecdotal data from retailers as we go to kind of put some color into what is right now just an outline. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Counsel?
Is there a, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chair,
Ms. Williams?
is there any rationing of services, so to speak? Are we, is there something limited? Because you said without cutting back any services. Certainly we're not cutting back essential services, but is there any services that are being?
Well, you know, we I guess it's how you define services. Of course, we're not providing services that are very meaningful in our rec centers and in some of our park facilities. Our museums are for the most part closed, so those are not being provided. But We're not looking at rationing public safety, public works outside of Parks and Rec, or any of the other services that the city provides. Of course, as you can imagine, we're exploring, what certain changes might indicate if we have to go to any of those. But today we're not planning any cut in services.
Just kind of a follow-up. The reason for that, I guess, is say that we don't have to, for any reason, cut any services unless it is to protect from the virus. It's not because of finances, and that's because we're in a position that we can go on without borrowing money or without cutting services because we're losing revenue.
That's a very good perspective. So it's the virus itself that may be limiting services, but not the economic impact at this point.
Yep. Thank you.
Mr. Days?
I just want to take this opportunity to say the obvious, which is that you build your reserves when times are good so that you have them available when inevitably times turn bad, like the ones we have now. Thank you, Mr.
Any other
Vice
council
President.
member?
Mr. Vice President, could I make a comment, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So what Mr. West said is if you have a $7.2 million loss, if that's right, or a reduction in revenue, and you have $42 million in reserve, you can do the calculation of, you can run for maybe 6 months like that. But if you would have a complete shutdown, you're going to have a whole lot more loss than the $7 million. So in good times, if we're at 23 million in revenue, and if you shut everything down, anybody's guess is as good as mine, but you could be looking at 10 to 14, $1 million loss, maybe even a little more than that. And so instead of having a 6 months run of being able to draw down on your reserve, then you go to 3 to 4 months. And so we are already looking at curtailing expenses. There are certain things that can only be spent. It has to go to the executive director level and really all the way to Mr. Wesh to get approval for it. I will say this, though, there are some expenditures that we'll be coming back to you to ask for your approval. We need a couple of garbage trucks. It was 5 years ago that we brought garbage trucks. We've had one burn up. So there's some things that we must do to continue providing services. So we're going to be frugal, but at the same time, know that we have got to spend money if we're going to keep on pushing through this, okay?
Any other council members?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes.
Adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Vice President, I would move the adoption of the agenda and also to declare the items on the essential COVID section of the agenda either necessary to respond to COVID-19 or necessary to perform essential minimum functions of the council.
You want to get a second? Been properly moved in second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Essential /COVID-19 resolutions 60249 through 60252.
Move for the immediate consideration of essential COVID-19 resolutions 60249 and through 60252.
Second.
Been properly moved in second. Any discussion? I would like to, discussion period, I think we need to bring this to the floor. As far as the future, I know we had a discussion pre-conference this morning about, what would go in this particular item and what would not go in this particular item. And I think we kind of left it open just a little bit, but I would like to just try to narrow this down as much as we can. And myself personally, I would like for our attorneys our council attorney and our city attorney really to get together to find out what is essential and probably put as much on essential as possible, because I believe that practice made perfect. It's no telling if next week we might have to be at home and we all might have to be chiming in over the phone or over social media or some kind of way, but practice might practice make perfect, and I believe that we probably need to just go ahead and go forth. And I would like to open up the discussion with my colleagues to see exactly how they feel about that.
I agree with you, Mr. Vice President.
1 second, Mr. Massey. Mr. Day.
I said I agree with your statement.
Mr. Massey.
I just would say that I concur completely, and I want to go on the record as saying that I think any and all items that are germane to the COVID-19 pandemic and the environment that we're in now would be applicable to this heading and would be essential to this heading. Any item associated with the health pandemic that we're facing now. Absent us having the pandemic, there would be no need for the heading. We would not have this special utilization from the governor. And so I think any and all items that are pertinent to the pandemic ought to go under this heading so that those of us who aren't able to be there in person might still be able to cast our votes for the citizens that duly elected us.
If I could weigh in?
Ms. Rich.
Thank you. I do think we need clarification on what's considered a basic essential service. And I heard Director Barber mention about, that the police need those motorcycles and whatever the next item was. But I think there just needs to be some real clarity to that should it get to the point where there is not a quorum that can physically be present, but that the essential basic city services can be performed for our citizens. And of course, as President Mancy mentioned, anything having to do with the COVID-19. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Williams.
I think it's important as we discuss this to use the exact words. In subparagraph B of paragraph 1, when in the governor's order or her exceptional proclamation is necessary to perform essential minimum functions of the government of the governmental body. It doesn't say there's so we have to be very, very careful. Necessary, essential, minimum functions of the governmental body. I don't know that we're going to decide that any quicker than we did the pre-council meeting, but it's certainly what we need to talk about between now and next week. And it'd be, as you say, Mr. Chair, the both legal teams agreeing to what that means. Thank you.
Ms. Gregory.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Williams. Appreciate you reading that back to us so that we remember what she said. I think minimum is certainly a broad term that can be interpreted a number of ways. So yes, both legal teams do need to meet so that we can determine exactly what that is and which items on the agenda we need to include that can be voted on by teleconference as well. But in the meantime, as we discussed during pre-conference, and Mr. Arledge has already agreed to work on this, we need to be reaching out to the governor as well as the League of Municipalities to ask for perhaps more flexibility, because as we go forward, we may not be able to meet in person. And I think the governor needs to realize that, so that in order for us to continue doing our jobs and keeping government open, we need to be able to vote remotely, at least temporarily, until this is over, if at all possible. And she gave us the wherewithal to do what we're doing now, so she just needs to be informed that that may not be enough to get us through the rest of this. And I think the mayor wants to meet probably through teleconference as well, so we may all have to figure out some sort of FaceTiming or something to enable us all to do this. But at any rate, I agree with what Mr. Williams said and Mr. Small.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Richardson.
I think we need to do just like we did this week. Let our attorney get with the city clerk and let him state in his legal opinion what items should be put in this category. That's Thursday. Between Thursday and Tuesday, we council members will have all the chance in the world to weigh in and do just like we did today. We took some of them off and moved on. That's all we need to do. Just let them put them up there. And if we don't think they should be up there, we can take them down. I think we need to just let it be, let them do their job, and then we'll do our job. Once they come on the agenda, then we'll have a chance to weigh in and say, I don't think that, but then if we can get consensus on that, they're going off. If we can't, they stay on. I think it's just as simple as that.
Okay. All right.
You go on the record that Mr. Richardson's going to disagree with me every time I talk today.
Mr. Ardrey.
Mr. Vice President, we did get together with the administration prior to the agenda coming out last Thursday in conjunction with the clerk, and we put those items in that category, and then yesterday afternoon several more popped up that we were pertinent that I sent to y'all. So we'll continue to keep doing that and creating the category and populating it, and like Mr. Richardson said, if y'all need to make adjustments, that's certainly within your power.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, like I say, I believe that practice made perfect. God forbid that we have to do remotely, but just in case, well, at least we'll be in the realm of things, okay?
Mr. President,
Mr. Richardson.
just want to make it crystal clear that I'm not one that disagree on most items on this agenda. In a whole year's time, 99.99% of the time, I vote yes. There are times that I vote no, but the frequency is no greater than any other council member.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Madam Clerk.
60249, resolution to prohibit unauthorized, excuse me, can I take all of these together, or do we
No.
take
You better
them
take them
separately?
separate.
Okay. 60249, resolution to prohibit unauthorized congregation of individuals on City of Mobile real property.
So move.
Second. Wait a minute, I got a second. Do I get a second?
You can second.
You can second it.
Second.
We got man said, been properly motion and second. In the discussion.
Yes,
Mr. Richardson.
we had a healthy discussion this morning at pre-council on this. I would just like to stress the purpose of this resolution is to keep people off public property. Is to eliminate the congregating of citizens. It's not trying to do anything else but that. It's addressing people who congregate, and they're still congregating on, and it's not trying to address people in a yard, wherever. This is public property, people congregating on public property. And I think every agency, every medical agency from Washington, D.C. down to the county, they all are saying the same thing about social distancing and the need for citizens to stay home. And this was intended to encourage our citizens not only to stay away from public property and as it relates to gathering, but to stay home.
Any other council members? Mr. Days.
Thank you. I'm not going to support this resolution, but I don't want my failure to support it to be interpreted as an approval of people getting together on public property. It's absolutely clear that people should not be congregating in large groups, and they should be keeping 6 feet away from each other. And we apparently are having, excuse me, a number of instances where people are disregarding those instructions. So I urge people to stay at home. I urge people to, if they're going to go out, don't do it in big groups. My concern with this is threefold. The Public Safety Director spoke to us at our earlier meeting and indicated that he had all the authority he needed in order to regulate this kind of activity. I'm reluctant to get too specific in terms of direction to the mayor and his administration. I think they need, we've given them a lot of authority. I think they have all the authority they need to regulate this. And then the final reason is I just don't think that enacting this resolution makes it less likely that people will gather together in large groups. And I'm reluctant to enact ordinances or resolutions that I think are going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to enforce. So again, I fully support the idea that people don't need to be congregating in groups in our public spaces or anywhere. But I can't support this particular resolution.
And
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Manager.
I'd like to say that I support the resolution probably for the complete opposite reasons Mr. Daves opposes it. If we can prevent one family, one biking group, one biking motorcycle club from congregating in our public spaces as a result of this resolution, and subsequently taking this virus and infecting others, particularly our senior community and those who are compromised, then we would have done our jobs. I would rather err on the side of doing too much than it to be said once something happens that we didn't do enough. And I'm all for restricting trails, walking trails, and items of those nature where people need to get out to get exercise. I'm all for extracting them out of the resolution, but I think the intent is good in its purpose. And I want to also say that this is no slight against Mayor Stimson and his efforts. I've seen him day in and day out work valiantly, try to protect the community to the degree that he believes he should. This isn't a slight against any department head. I believe this is us doing what we can with the tools we have to protect the citizens that we've been elected to protect. And so I am in favor of the resolution, and I'm hopeful that if by way of us passing it, one individual is not infected with this very dangerous disease, then it would have done its job.
Mr. Chair, whenever you-
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you very much. Again, I'm going to read from a state document, which is an order. It's not a recommendation, and it is a statewide order. Along with this state order was the authority of all, may get corrected, this is not a quote, of law enforcement agencies to enforce such an order. And it says, this is the latest order, effective today when she made it. All non-work related gatherings of 25 persons or more, or non-work related gatherings of any size, that cannot maintain consistent 6-foot distance between persons are prohibited, employers shall take all reasonable steps to meet these standards. I think it's clear. There already is an order in place. There already is a law in place. And it comes with it the full authority of all law enforcement agencies to do such. Any other orders, we have to be careful that we don't confuse which one they have to follow and which one reads how. We have an order. And if this order is not clear enough for us, let's talk to the governor so that we're speaking with one voice. Very important for not just for the citizenry, but for the law enforcement agencies that have to enforce it. Thank you.
Ms. Gregory.
If I could weigh in, please.
Ms. Gregory, and then Ms. Rich.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Williams, for reminding us about that, about the statewide order that is in effect now. I would like to ask our Parks and Recreation Director, Shonda Smith, who is here, some questions about what they are doing now and what they intend to do going forward, because what this is aimed at is keeping people from congregating in groups. It's not aimed at keeping people out of the parks or shutting the parks down. So if people are not getting the message, do we need to send another message? And if so, how do we go about doing it? Do we need to pass something like this in order to get the message through to people? Or what are you doing? I think I just need to leave it at that. What are y'all doing?
Yes, good morning again. So working with comms and with the mayor, he's sending out a daily message. And so being sure that we're including more aggressive language about how to use the parks. The reality is there's a lot of people that's out in the parks who has not been out there in the past, but getting them to be more responsible, not utilizing the playgrounds. We are actually removing basketball rims, being able to make sure that we're communicating, to stay social distance. In the meantime, in between the break, Councilman Richardson had a really good idea because we had not turned off the push button lights. So meaning the lights go out, but you still have the access to push the button and it'll stay on for another 2 hours. We're actually dismantling those today so that they won't have that access after dark. So the bigger part is working with Director Barber to communicate about the spaces we don't want them in after dark, but also getting them to be educated on social distancing. We don't want them playing soccer, basketball, and those items, but we very much want them to walk the trails. We want them to get out and walk and get fresh air.
Well, I think the problem is the congregating side of it. And when you have people in parks who, even a group of 25, making them stay 6 feet apart. Unless we've got a police officer at every park with every group, I don't know how we can make people stay 6 feet apart. So how can we better get that message across? We want you to utilize the parks, but you've got to follow what the state is mandating.
Yes, so speaking with the other colleagues, their bigger thing has been messaging and putting it out. So we could putting out signs. Anitra, after this, we're meeting to create language and we will share with you also if you put it in your newsletter to put that out. And then going through the mayor's office. That's the only thing that I've realized that other counterparts are doing. It's hard because it's managing people and it's how do you get people to follow directions.
And Matt, if I may, also just using social media and the other media that's here today and put stuff out every day to reinforce what Councilman Williams said, the state guidance, which is maintaining 6-foot separation, period. So we just have to continue that to include in areas like our parks.
So no matter what happens with this resolution today, the order is in effect. The enforcement is there. Do you consider this overkill? Or is it just another way of getting the message out?
I think it's putting an exclamation point on something that's already there that doesn't need it. But we do need the media to continue to reinforce what's already written and has already been published.
Ms. Rich?
Thank you. I had trouble hearing the Parks Director, but I had some emails with her over the weekend, which I really appreciated her attention to the questions that I had because my phone rang. The idea that we want people to separate by 6 is very sound. 6 feet, between them because of the exposure to the how the virus spreads. So I think that this resolution offers a lot of messaging and unification of the council that there are things that cannot go on right now if we are to flatten the curve. And the flattening of the curve is to make sure we do not overwhelm our healthcare system. That's the whole idea of it. People are going to get sick. Some degree might be very light, others extremely life-threatening. But the point is that by separating, that's really, really the key right now. It's the one known that we can all participate in. And I like the idea of signage. I think I heard her say something about signage at the park to remind people. But this council can step up and ask that there be resources, which basically we'd be asking for because of asking the police or health people from our Department of Health to come out and to tell people to disperse if they're not aware or they refuse to listen, because they are really putting everyone at risk. But I think opening the trails and our walking system throughout our city is healthy and should stay in place. And some parks have ribbons of that, and I would like to see that remain open. But the playground, organized sports, or even unorganized spontaneous sports are not helpful, or our reunions and our birthday parties. And our park should not be a location where any of that goes on today. And it's temporary, and the sooner we get through this, then the sooner everything goes back to normal. No one is asking this to be a life sentence by any means. So I think the resolution is clear. It has an ending point, which we would know about, and I'm really certain that it would send a message that would be extremely helpful to everyone in our community from all walks of life. And I know that I support it at 100%. Thank you.
Director of Public Safety. Director of Public Safety.
And again, the authority to enforce the governor's rules already exists. And it's pretty clear from the Attorney General, law enforcement can indeed enforce those rules. And so I don't really see the ordinance as enhancing our capacity to do any more than what we are doing. I think some of the things that Shonda is doing.
May I ask who's speaking?
This is our Director Barber.
May you speak directly into the microphone? I can't understand anything you're saying.
I think some of the steps, the physical steps that Shonda Smith is taking with the parks themselves, as far as, like the removal of basketball goals, certainly is an environmental issue that will help us keep people from congregating. And those are more appropriate. They seem to help us more with keeping people from congregating. But for the most part, I've seen a lot of real good compliance throughout the city of Mobile by people making sure they keep their distance and certainly not touching each other. So we've not really had a huge issue. There are some resistant people. I mentioned earlier that we're going to go out with the health department and motivate some of them to comply with the state's laws. And we certainly are working with City Legal on an instrument to enforce those laws should people be reluctant to comply. But that's my position on it. I understand the messaging that you're trying to send, but does it really enhance our capacity? It really does not.
Mr. President?
Pardon?
Does it hurt?
It doesn't hurt us, but it really isn't enhancing what I'm already capable of doing.
Mr. Richardson?
It seems like to me the fear is that we're doing too much. That we are telling the people, they've been told to stay home. We don't have to tell them anymore. If you read the Bible, it says, tell them when they leave, tell them when they come back, tell them when they're standing, tell them when they are seated. Maybe they'll get the point. There's no such thing as doing too much with the COVID virus. There's no such thing as that, as an overkill. If we had a vehicle going through every community in this city, broadcasting stay home, that wouldn't be too much. There's no such thing as too much. What the fear is that they might abide by the resolution. The fear is they might even go home. Let's not do that. We got laws. Don't tell them that. They might even go home if you did that. When drugs became epidemic in this country, we had the police department, including Director Barber, coming to us. So we need to go beyond arresting them if we catch them with drugs. We need to go beyond that. If they have the apparatus with them that they use to smoke drugs in, we need to get them for that. And the council passed it. You can be riding in your car and have some glass that look like they can smoke dope in them. They can put them in jail for having that apparatus. And that's not going too far. We are just telling them to stay home, to stay off city property, not to congregate. There's no such thing as telling them too much. It is the executive branch responsibility to enforce the law. It is the council's responsibility to create the law. We cannot be interfering with the mayor because he is executive. He has to enforce the law. It is our responsibility to pass the laws and the rules we think necessary for our citizens to be safe. And public safety, the safety of our citizens is above any other act we can think about. That's the first reason cities were created. That's the first reason for government itself was public safety. Man in the state of nature could not protect themselves because the stronger overbear the weak. And the weak got together and gave up some of their rights in the form of a government to protect them. That's our job, to protect the citizen. This ordinance is seeking to protect our citizens from the COVID-19 virus. And a vote against this is saying, let's not protect them. I don't care what you say. A rose by any other name will smell the same.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Gregory.
Just to be clear, this is not to shut down the parks, correct, Mr. Richardson?
No, ma'am.
It is only to reinforce the message about not congregating, correct?
Amen.
And Shonda, can y'all put some barricades and taping things up around the playgrounds and the pavilions just to help reinforce the message?
Yes, that can be done, but also to be clear, we locked the basketball courts and locks were cut and fences were ripped down to get into the courts. Hence the reason we're taking down the backboards. So just to be clear, the signage doesn't seem to preclude people. I mean, if they're breaking down the fence, you know, I'm guessing a piece of yellow tape around a pavilion isn't going to stop them.
I understand that, but if it's one more way to send a message.
Correct.
You know, if people are not getting the messages as it is, we've got to do everything we can to send a message, and every little bit hopefully will help.
Right.
Mr. Vice President.
Mr. Days.
I'm 100% behind sending messages on this. We need to be sending messages. This is a very blunt instrument to send the message. We can pass a resolution. We can sit here for 2 hours discussing this, which we've already done, and we can send strong messages that this is a sledgehammer when a scalpel will do. That's why I'm against it.
Mr. President,
Mr. Richardson.
if the scalpel was working, nobody should have been at the park yesterday. The scalpel is not working. We need to send another message. When I passed by Sage Park, they was all over that park playing. Sunday, the parks were filled up. They had the scalpel out there. Nobody was respecting no scalpel. We got to go a step further to help send the message. We tried the scalpel. It's not working.
Another council member? Myself personally, I have
Can I ask
been.
a question? Can I ask a question?
Yes, Ms. Rich?
Thank you. If we're going to keep our playgrounds open, is the city prepared to have them bleached or Lysoled after usage in order to cut down on the germs that could be left behind when there's lots and lots of people? Whereas if it's limited in number, it would be safer. So I'm wondering what if we are going to allow people to do this, what the city's responsibility becomes.
This is Shonda. We do not have the capacity to wipe down playgrounds, and it will have to actually be done after every usage. So we don't have the capacity to do that.
Yes, ma'am. I agree that there's no way we can do that. But the only way we can cut that down is to tell people to either look, and if there's more children, if it's packed in, don't go. And it's just doing what we know we can do to get the message out. And it's temporary, but it's so important at this time and space and moment. And so I'm pretty passionate about it, and I really hope that this passes, because it's something that we as a council can help get people to understand what their responsibilities are and how they can go about conducting themselves during this time period where everyone that has to be responsible. And the 6 feet rule is there. You're all doing it. And as far as it's really also at the bottom line, which I know is huge for me and very personal, but we're really protecting our healthcare workers who we know are going to be dealing with all the levels of this illness. And so we can't overwhelm the system. And if we can't make things clean where people have been or are being, then that staying away from it at this point is necessary. And I also believe that the walking paths, because we can keep the distances there, that should be allowed to be open. And that's something that's very important. Doctors in our city, doctors who provide health care, have closed their businesses except for emergencies. Doesn't that tell you something? It's a big message. We have to be part of it. We have to help. And we have to do our share. And I appreciate the resolution. And I don't like a nanny state any more than anybody else. But it's something that the city council should participate in and send a huge message so we flatten that curve earlier than later. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Manzi?
I heard the statement about the sledgehammer, scalpel. As of right now, 17 governors have issued stay-at-home orders for their citizens to stay at home. And that's not include municipalities across this country. So surely, this resolution dealing with our parks, when governors have issued wholesale stay-at-home orders, is not a sledgehammer.
Mr. Chair,
Thank
just,
you.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Williams?
I don't think he's done yet.
He's done.
Okay. I just remind everybody, the law is already in place. The governor of the state of Alabama said, don't do it. Exactly what we're trying to say. And any other messages, when we're not speaking with one voice, can be confusing. And it does not enable our law enforcement agencies to do any more than they're doing now. We've already heard they're going to do all they can regardless of this. I'm staying with the governor's order. The governor has made it clear that it essentially is against the law to congregate in 25 or more, or in any instance where the 6 foot distance cannot be maintained. I don't know how else to say it. Thank you.
Any other council members? Well, myself personally, I have actually been on the fence with this particular resolution, understanding that it's really nothing at home for the kids to really do. Some kids don't even have internet at home, You know, I was talking to one principal on last evening, and she said they was giving work, you know, sent home, but it's not really mandatory that the kids can really do it, because it's not going to really go on account. And when the kids actually find out, and especially if their parents not making them to do the work, what else is for the kids to really to do? You know, it's the parents' responsibility to pretty much raise their own kids. And unfortunately, we have some parents out there that's not raising their kids and probably looking for government to do it. Also, you got to realize there's a possibility that school might not even go back in session this year, and they could be out until the fall. And my concerns is if the kids don't burn off energy in the park and play, where they're gonna burn energy off at? And hopefully, you know, not in the neighborhoods, breaking in somebody's, you know, house or car and et cetera. Hearing citizens saying, you know, you haven't done enough, you know, what else could we do? You know, and that's why I pretty much been on the fence as saying we could pass this resolution, say that we have tried to do as much as we could. I heard that our public safety director said that, you know, it won't hurt to pass it. And also heard our public works director also said that, you know, pretty much it's almost putting like an exclamation mark behind what the governor had, you know, put already mandated. So, you know, 2 exclamation marks to me is better than 1 exclamation mark. And, you know, hearing one of my colleagues saying that, you know, it could bring some confusion about the situation. Well, one thing about the confusion is that it's a message as to stay away 6 feet apart. You know, stay 6 feet apart as much as possible. And we know kids gonna be kids, they're gonna play. But, you know, as much as message that we can put out there and ask the kids and ask the families to, you know, keep kids away and keep people from congregating 6 feet closer than what they should be, you know, we need to try to do as much as we can. And again, I have been on the fence about this particular resolution, but I will support this resolution in order to, you know, to put more exclamation marks out there, you know, keep 6 feet distance away, because I don't want a child to go out to a playground equipment, which I had read on yesterday, where this COVID virus can be on a piece of metal for up to 17 days. You know, 17 days. And we know that most of our playground equipment have metal on there. And I don't want those kids to go out there and take that virus back home to their grandparents, which most time their grandparents is over the age of 60 and 65 years of age, and make our society more sicker than what it is. And I pray that there are not that many cases out there. I pray that we are acting premature, but I'd rather act premature than be redundant. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Rich?
Aye.
Manzi?
Aye.
So that's 5 ayes, all opposed?
No.
Motion passes.
34251, resolution to waive certain late payment penalties on city sales tax and city lodgings tax.
So moved.
Been properly moving second in the discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Passes.
6252, support a letter to government officials to urge them to alter provisions in the Families First Coronavirus Response Act.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and
Second.
been properly moved and second in the discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Public hearings. Public hearing to consider approval of a certificate of public convenience and necessity for a shuttle service to Shanrick Watson, doing business as Trusting Reliable Transportation.
Do we have anyone present to speak on this on behalf of this public hearing? If not, the public hearing is closed.
Today is a public hearing to fix the cost for securing structures, demolition of structures, and to declare structures public nuisances and ordering them demolished. Properties located at 2419 Bruton Avenue, 1364 St. Meter Street, 612 Houston Street, 304 St. Charles Avenue, 2062 Victory Court, 7156 Mobile Street, and 168 West Drive.
Do we have anyone here present to speak on these public hearings? If you can give us your name and your address.
Elizabeth Moyd, 168 West Drive, until a week ago, when my youngest daughter evicted me from my home and made me homeless. I have been living there since 1958. I helped my parents build that home in 1957. My late sister and I lugged all those concrete blocks to build the two-storied home. My father and grandfather laid those bricks. My mother was a mud tender. In the last few
Which
years-
property are you speaking on now?
This is
Okay.
West
168
Drive.
West
Okay.
Drive. And 6 years ago, my health took a turn for the dive. And I wasn't able to upkeep the property like I had been. And I'd have to hire people to come in and cut the grass if nothing else. The house was starting to leak. I got on the roof myself and repaired the roof with roll tarp. I tarred it all down and it wasn't leaking anymore. But August 1st, I retired from the library. And a month later, I got sick with bronchitis, pneumonia, and AFib. I went through 4 heart catheterizations and a device called a Watchman that was put in my heart to stop blood clots. January, I ended up taking the pneumonia shot. 3 weeks later, I got double pneumonia, and I had it till June 12th. And I was in and out of the hospital so much until I might as well made my residence at the hospital. I'm well now. I'm walking 20 miles a week. But my daughter, whose name is on the deed, has decided to come up, and she lives in Florida. She's never paid any of the taxes on the place. I moved back in 2000 when my father and mother died in 98 and 99. And I have been taking care of the place. I've paid all the taxes that my father's had arrearage, and then I've been paying the taxes since 2000 until current. And she is just wanting to come in and demolish the house and demolish everything. Yesterday, I had all of the family's heirlooms, pictures and everything put out in storage that I have been collecting over the years to keep it from being destroyed by the weather. It's now in the city dump. My daughter come and got it all. I'm homeless, I'm without anything. I had a tent, I was living in the tent from June 12th until a week ago. And then she has turned around and destroyed my tent and evicted me off of the place. My thing is, I have got a court date coming up with a probate, because I'm fighting for this for squatters' rights, because I know I have rights, and I have been living there. I just want the city, should y'all turn around and have to demolish the house and everything, to postpone it a little bit until I can have this probate hearing to where I can get the property back in my name.
I have a question.
Yes,
Ms.
ma'am.
Gregory?
I just didn't hear initially, did you say that you are currently living or were currently living at West Drive?
Yes, ma'am, in a tent.
But you were in the house prior
Prior to that, yes, ma'am. Until it, 2 days before I got out of the hospital last June, I guess that would be June 10th, the roof caved in, the north side of the house.
Oh, so the
And
roof
it
caved
went-
in, so you had to move into a tent at that
Right.
point.
Mm-hmm. And I was doing fine, because I lived in a tent when we was building the house. And I just want y'all to consider,
Am I allowed to weigh in even though I can't vote?
I think
She
so.
can't weigh in.
Yes.
Yes.
She can speak.
Thank you, because this is in the district I represent, and Ms. Moy did call the office, and I asked the Secretary Courtney to please get her directly in touch with David Dossenbach about her concerns, and I'm not sure that transpired, and I couldn't hear her commentary very well from this angle remotely, but I think some of her concerns are civil court and not something to do necessarily with the conditions of the property. But is David in the audience?
Yes.
Do you think that you might want to bring him down to the podium so he can weigh in and I don't remember it being discussed at pre-conference, whether each item was, I don't think we did, but that might be it might be a very good time for him to come forward.
He's here.
Mr. David. Yeah. You can have a seat.
David Dockenbaugh, Deputy Director of Municipal Enforcement. Municipal Enforcement became aware of this property back in November of 2019, and we have discovered that there's an unsafe structure. And as you heard already from the previous testimony, that there are roof problems, exterior wall, foundation issues. The door is always open when our inspectors are on site, so it's open to the public with broken windows. And that's the reason why we're on site. But in addition to that, in the packet that you have that we've uploaded, the photographs, you can see that the entire yard is full of debris, garbage, and trash. We have another situation here of a hoarding situation, and you can see that through all the debris in the yard. We did discover in November that Miss Moyd, Elizabeth Moyd, was living in a tent. And what she was doing is pulling electricity from the structure and still using part of the structure, but living in a tent. And yes, she did stay throughout the winter, through all the cold nights. We have a policy in municipal enforcement not to go after and declare public nuisances of structures where it's occupied. But this is one of those gray areas where the structure was no longer occupied, so we decided to go forward. And we did. We sent notices to everybody that has standing or ownership in this property. And the title report came back and we discovered that, yes, the daughter of Elizabeth, Carol Moyd, who is here and spoke to us, the daughter is Ramey Blair Moyd, and she is the owner of record. And we sent notice to both the daughter and the mother, and they received notice. However, we feel that we need to go forward because of the condition of the structure. However, a civil action of eviction was pursued by the daughter, and the put-out order was served last Friday. So what you heard was true. Currently, it's my understanding that Miss Moyd, Elizabeth Moyd, behind me, is living in a hotel, and we have referenced her to Housing First to coordinate long-term living arrangements. So she is no longer on the property. And what this does is it frees us up, because I believe, listening from the testimony of my field inspectors and hearing what's going on the site, that Elizabeth Moyd behind me was kind of a roadblock for the daughter, Blair Moyd, to take action. And now that she's not on the property, it's my understanding that the daughter is going forward and cleaning up the property today. And we've heard that testimony that some of the storage units are on site and it's starting to be cleaned up. And it's the verbal communication to municipal enforcement that the daughter is prepared to clean up the property now that the mother is no longer on the property and go forward with the demolition. However, since the demolition has not occurred and we are at the public hearing, it's municipal enforcement's position to ask the council to go forward and declare it a public nuisance so that in the event that the civil procedures between the two, mother and daughter, don't pan out in favor of a demolition, that we're in a position to go forward in a couple months.
So do we need to lay this over, David?
My recommendation would be no to vote today to declare it a public
Go
nuisance.
ahead and do it today,
However,
sir.
if you do decide to lay it over, I would suggest no more than 2 months so that we're still within the 120-day time frame. So I would not have to start over
I just wasn't completely sure what you were recommending, given different legal suits that are ongoing.
Speaking with just a moment ago in the audience before the council started, it sounds like that she has an attorney, she's secured an attorney, and she's filing a motion for squatters' rights. That's what she's explained to me, and I believe she mentioned that here as testimony. I don't know what's going to happen, but it sounds like that there's a hearing set. So if the council decides you want to hold it over or table it for 60 days to let that pan out, I don't think it's going to change the status of the condition of the property. And in no way would it prevent the owner of the property, the daughter, from taking action while we table the decision.
Well, if we table the decision to give her time to go forward with her court case for squatters' rights, would that not impair the daughter's ability to move forward? I mean, I guess she could demolish it, but...
I couldn't answer that. That's a legal decision on what's the criteria to issue a demolition permit. I would think that barring any judge's order to stay a demolition permit, that the owner of the property could apply for a permit.
Where's Bess?
And
Yeah,
Ms. Rich,
Bess.
are you finished, or
Does Bess want to?
Ms. Rich?
Let's call him Bess. So can you get her back?
I wonder if the phone line...
Do you still see the phone numbers?
Yeah, it's 463.
Then she's still there.
I'm calling her.
It's not.
It say attendance 2.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
Hey, yeah, hold on. Hold on. No, just use mine. Use mine. Hold on. Here's Bess. Go ahead, Bess.
Okay, I'm sorry, I got cut off from the system. I could only hear partial what David was telling everybody from his perspective. And, my heart breaks for this situation. But I know that there's health and safety issues around that site for others in the neighborhood. And can somebody kind of summarize what David said so I know what his advice was?
His advice was to go ahead and declare it.
Well, his advice was to go ahead and declare it, but he also said that the mother has a court case pending for trying to get squatters' rights, which I guess could impact the whole situation. But in the meantime, since the daughter's name is on the deed, she could probably move forward anyway with demolition no matter what we do.
Yeah. If you look in your packets, you'll see the condition of the property. And so I certainly would be saying that that's probably the best course of action right now, what David recommends.
And just to supplement, even if it was declared today, we still have a 10-day appeal period, and we still have a time to put a break on the city going forward, because realistically, we're pushing through all the contracts we can to get in the contractors' hands. We want to make sure that everybody's still operating, even though the virus is here in our community, that we're still functional. So it's going to be 3 months, maybe 4, before we would get this into the hands of the
Did you hear that, Bess?
No, I can't.
That was,
I'm sorry.
David, what said was by statute that we're going to have a 10-day period anyway, that allows some time for legal action if that is what the courts decide. And then it's on top of that, just trying to, with limited function of contractors and being able to process all of this stuff in the midst of what we're dealing with now, that it's probably going to be 3 to 3.5 months anyway. So that he recommends that we go along with the action as it is presented here in our agendas.
Does she get assistance with any kind of rehousing?
Yes.
Housing First has been recommended to her, and she's now in a hotel at the present.
Okay, so she can get assistance, though? She'll be in a pipeline for that, too?
We're not sure of that. We just know that she's been referred to Housing First.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all.
All right.
Thanks, Bess.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to keep you on here if you don't mind.
Do we have anyone that is here present to speak on these public hearings? If not, the public hearings are closed.
Presentation of petitions and other communications to the council. We did receive one communication to the council regarding the coronavirus and with respect to a total shutdown in the city and small businesses, that small businesses are the ones suffering. This communication was not signed. It did not have an address or a name, just an email address. So we will record this in the minutes.
Thank you.
Ordinance is held over. 22008, ordinance to amend section 22.2 of the Mobile City Code dealing with fire service features of the 2012 International Fire Code.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. Any discussion?
Please, I would like the Public Works, or excuse me, Public Safety Director to just clarify what it is that we're accomplishing here.
Yeah, the existing ordinance requires a developer to put in either asphalt or concrete surfaces in order for the fire trucks to access the construction site. The International Fire Code really only requires a suitable surface for the fire trucks to travel on, such as an aggregate surface. It is my intent to follow the International Fire Code and not make it more difficult and expensive on developers to develop large areas such as. Also, just so you know, the code was not being followed when Airbus came in. They used an aggregate, and we approved it. And so all we want to do is be consistent, make our codes follow the International Fire Code so that we are not unduly burdensome on developers.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
Consent resolutions held over. 37185, recommend approval to the ABC Board for issuance of a retail beer, table, wine, off-premises only license for Lucky 99 on Somerville Street.
Move to table.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
CIP resolutions held over. 01213, authorize agreement with the Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners of the City of Mobile for reimbursable agreement for Baltimore Street and Drainage Rehabilitation. 21216, authorize contract with ACOM Technical Services for engineering services of Baltimore Street and Drainage Rehabilitation. 21217, authorized contract with Chris Brewer Contracting for 2020 city-wide annual sidewalk repair and maintenance.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. Any discussion? Yeah, I would like to discuss on 01-213, also 21-216. This is the beginning of the work for the revitalization of Baltimore Street. When I first took council, Ann Street and Baltimore Street is, two of the things I had said that I want to get done, and I was told that neither one was going to get done. So we see that Ann Street in the District 3 side has been totally revitalized, and Baltimore Street is on its way. Next week, we're having a contract before the council to pass a resolution to go ahead and for the contractor, and that will be on next week's agenda. Again, this is the agreement between the Board of Water and Sewer Commission and the City of Mobile, the beginning of the work of Baltimore Street. It's a great day for the citizens in the Oakdale community, a long time coming. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
1 cent.
Resolutions held over. 01218, authorize a foreign trade zone operator agreement with Roar Inc. 08219, approved purchase order to Mobile Bay Harley-Davidson for 2 Harley-Davidson motorcycles. 08220, approve purchase to Sunbelt Fire for 140 sets of leather fire boots. 21221, authorized contract with Southern Earth Sciences for laboratory testing for Bates C&D Landfill Professional Services. 37222, approve a certificate of public convenience and necessity to Chitra May Wilson, doing business as here and there, non-emergency transportation to operate a shuttle service.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
Hey, before we go to the next category, we need to move an item that was mistakenly put in resolutions being introduced. And that's 60247, am I correct, Madam
Yeah,
Clerk?
we could just take it up. If we just take it up when we get to that, that would be easier.
Okay, whatever you like. Thank
Okay,
you. Yep.
that would be easier. Consent resolutions being introduced, 31226 through 60250.
Motion to suspend the rules for immediate consideration of resolutions 31226 through 60250.
Second.
Properly moved and second. In the discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
31226, authorized grant application to the National Institute of Justice for the fiscal year 2020 Research and Evaluation on Domestic Terrorism Prevention Grant. No match. 40, 227, 228, 229, 230, 231, 232, and 233 are fixing the cost for securing structures, demolition of structures, and declaring structures public nuisances and ordering them demolished. We weren't laying any of those over, right?
No.
Okay,
No.
all right. 37234, recommend approval to the ABC Board for issuance of a retail beer table wine off-premises only license for DP 2 Stop on Wagner Street. 60250, determine an appropriation to Feeding the Gulf Coast serves a public purpose and approve payment.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. In the discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
Resolutions, CIP resolutions being introduced, 09235 through 21237.
Motion to suspend the rules for immediate consideration of resolutions 09235 and 21237, and 21236 will hold over 1 week pursuant to council rules.
Second.
Properly moved and second. In the discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
09235, transfer monies from the Government Street Signal Improvement Project to Grant Fund Congestion Management Project, Government Street, from Broad Street to Bankhead Tunnel.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. In the discussion?
Just clarification, if you will. This is only moving money from one place to another, one account to another, and it is not authorizing the expenditure of those funds, so that's why we're waiving the rules on it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
Resolutions being introduced, 01238 through 60.
Wait.
Yeah.
We need to do 21237.
Yeah.
Right.
Under 50,000, yeah.
Oh, okay. 21237, authorized contract with Mycor Inc., doing business as MDS Construction for James M. Seals and Sullivan Park Splash Pad recoding.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. In discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
Resolutions being introduced, 01238 through 60247.
Said resolutions will hold over 1 week pursuant to council rules.
With the exception of 60247,
Yeah,
which we'll vote on now.
yeah.
I ain't got nothing against it.
As he said.
Okay. 6247, determine expenditure to the Little Sisters of the Poor of Mobile serves a public purpose and approve payment.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. In discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
Call for public hearings. 41248, call for public hearing to consider approval of a certificate of public convenience and necessity to DeQuilla Smith, doing business as Merry-Go-Round Transportation, to operate a shuttle service scheduled April 7th.
So move.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
Announcements.
District 1, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me use my time in thanking my colleagues for supporting Resolution 60249, a resolution that was intended to eliminate the congregation of citizens on public property. Today, we collectively send a message to the entire community that you can no longer gather on public property until that day that the state public emergency is lifted. In other words, our message today is stay home. This is a bold step, and I commend each of my colleagues for your courage. Thank you very much, and I believe in the end we would be contributing to the healthiness of our community when we voted in Resolution 60249. Thank you.
District 4, Councilman Williams.
I was going to ask to go in turn. Boy, you're reading my mind, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. We didn't actually tell people to stay home. And I think it's really important to understand that we didn't tell people to stay home. We told them to obey the order that was given to us by state. One of our things that we don't see on the agenda is a whereas, and whereas the state officer, state health officer of the state of Alabama entered an order prohibiting any gatherings of size where consistent 6-foot distance between persons cannot be maintained. And then we resolved that for this duration that there would be no congregations where, unless a consistent 6-foot distance between such persons is maintained. And so we're not telling people to stay home. While we encourage people to stay home if they're sick or when not necessary by their judgment, we resolved. We didn't order, we resolved that people observe the state order. And that is, and I'm going to read it because I think it's very important, and I hope it goes into the record here, that for the duration of the aforesaid state health officer's order, no person may congregate on any City of Mobile property unless a consistent 6-foot distance between each or between such persons is maintained. And number 2, that the mayor of the City of Mobile is requested to take necessary measures to implement this resolution. It's further requested to close all city real property to the public in the event the congregation of persons prohibited hereby cannot be implemented, with the exception of congregations of people necessary for COVID-19 testing, other activities necessary to fight the COVID-19 outbreak, and official city business. That's what we did. We did not tell people to stay home. We did not prohibit all congregations on city property. We did not prohibit any activity whatsoever on city properties unless a consistent 6-foot distance between such persons is maintained. Thank you.
District 5, Mr. Daves.
Thank you. This crisis that we're in is only going to be resolved when people take personal responsibility for their actions and the actions of those who are dependent upon them. We can sit up here and pass all the laws we want to, but until people take personal responsibility for their own actions, we all are at risk. So I would urge all of our citizens to do the things you know you have to do in order to prevent the spread of this virus. If you're sick, stay at home. If you're out in public, don't get any closer than 6 feet from anybody else. Wash your hands frequently. Thank you.
District 6, Councilwoman Bess Rich.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the council supporting the resolution about the standards at the park. And I really think it'll be extremely helpful. Of course, people, like Councilman Dave said, people have to have self-responsibility. And this is serious what we're dealing with, and I believe that point's been driven home. My heart breaks for businesses that had to shut down, for residents and leaders in our community, and just any person that now is told to go home. It's scary for everybody. It truly is, but we have to do this, and the sooner we get through it, the sooner we can go back to normality. The other thing is the N95 type of mask that people wear. Some businesses have this in the course of their business, and they're collecting them at the Mobile County Medical Society, which is 2701 Airport Boulevard, between the hours of 9 and 4. He'll drop them off. That'll be extremely helpful to our healthcare providers of all disciplines. Again, I've been, paying attention to what people are doing during this time, and I've been very impressed with neighbors that are reaching out to each other through emails and putting flyers out, asking if anyone needs help. There's one neighborhood that I'm particularly aware of, which is Pinehurst. They set out a table where people put excess things that they had for people to come by and pick up what they needed, and the table grew in the course of the weekend. They needed a larger table for people helping each other, and I particularly love that spirit about Mobilians. And also our first responders, our mayor's office, our public safety, officials that are going to be on the first line, constantly on the first line, particularly now. I hope they're well prepared, which I know they will be. But the more we can do as an average citizen to help lower this cost contamination, the faster they can get out of harm's way as well. And again, I appreciate all of our healthcare providers from every single level that are stepping up to the plate and are going to do exactly what they're trained to do, and how blessed we are in this city to have such talent and expertise, which are there to keep us safe. So I'll leave it at that, but thank you, and I miss you all.
All right. District 7, Councilwoman Gregory.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Williams and Mr. Daves are absolutely correct on the item that we passed dealing with congregating at parks. Parks are not closed, but just remember, we are following state law and just reiterating what the state law is, which is, of course, no more than 25 people and only if you can stay 6 feet apart. So just keep that in mind. I don't want anybody to have the wrong impression that we are closing the park. Someone had sent us an email saying that he didn't think we should close the parks. Well, we are not closing the parks, and hopefully we don't have to close the parks. A couple of other things I do want to do a shout out to the Public Works folks who were very busily picking up trash on Saturday. So many people are home, and you combine that with the fact that it's spring and people are getting ready to do a lot of yard work. So our crews were a little behind. They were picking up on Saturday, so I had to go out and take a picture and wave and tell them thanks. So just a big shout out to all of our first responders, first line responders, and of course that includes our Public Works folks. A big thank you also to the Alpine Hills Community Action Group. They were out on Saturday doing their normal litter cleanup and beautification of the entire area. Recently, some signs were put up along Ziegler Boulevard saying that do not litter. The unfortunate thing was some of those signs were put right in the middle of a lot of litter. So I don't know how much good those signs do, but thank you to the Alpine Hills Community Action Group for doing their part to help clean things up. My April 9th district meeting obviously is postponed. We're making sure that everybody knows that. I'll be sending out a newsletter with the information that I had intended to bring forward at the meeting, so just stay tuned. We'll be sending out information, mostly dealing with Ziegler Boulevard widening, some changes going on at Langen Park, and other things that we normally talk about at our meetings, so we will send that out. And just one other thing I wanted to mention, we today approved a resolution providing more than $10,000 to Feeding the Gulf Coast. The council is providing some discretionary funds because of the tremendous need. Feeding the Gulf Coast was having difficulty providing enough food, and they have reached out to the community for help. And so I thank all of my council members who have provided discretionary funds to help with this. It is a much-needed service, and we're just happy to be able to help. And I know Marion will be putting out some more information about that later on this afternoon. There are a number of feeding sites that are available, so we just want to make sure that everybody is aware of those. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
And greetings to District 3. Like I had announced last week that our annual Easter egg hunt is canceled this year, unfortunately, and also our spring meeting is postponed until further notice. To our city clerk, sister city clerk, and to her staff, we thank you all so much for your hard work that you all have been doing over the past week, especially working with Councilwoman Rich and Councilman President Manzi by having them remotely chiming in. And we know that y'all got some more further work to do, especially if we have to stay at home and everything. Again, we do appreciate you all so much. And also to our attorney and the city attorney, we thank you all so much and continue working together so we can move our city forward. Any announcements from the city council? Can I get a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Can I get a second? Motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned.